The radio crackled with static, her research team's voices barely audible through the interference. She'd been tracking the Cascadian apex for 3 months, documenting behavior patterns of the massive predator that had become the subject of heated debate between conservationists and local communities. The creature stood 12 feet tall at the shoulder, its silver-black coat rippling with muscle beneath. Evolution had crafted it perfectly for these Pacific Northwest forests, silent paws that could navigate the undergrowth without disturbing a single leaf, eyes that could track movement in near-total darkness, and jaws powerful enough to snap. A elk's spine with a single bite. Local tribes spoke of it in whispers, calling it Siahayu, the Shadow Walker. Elena had dedicated her career to understanding apex predators, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. The Cascadian apex had been stalking her for the past hour, its massive form materializing and vanishing between the towering Douglas firs like smoke. She could feel its presence, an ancient intelligence weighing her every movement, deciding whether she posed a threat. The forest held its breath. Even the ever-present Pacific drizzle seemed to pause, leaving only the sound of Elena's heartbeat, thundering in her ears. She'd read every research paper, studied every blurry trail camera photograph, but facing the creature in person revealed the inadequacy of academic preparation. This wasn't just a large predator, it was a force of nature, a living embodiment of the wilderness itself. Through her peripheral vision, she caught sight of movement. The apex emerged from behind a massive fallen log, its pale yellow eyes locked on hers. There was no hostility in its gaze, only a profound curiosity. Elena realized with startling clarity that she wasn't being hunted, she was being evaluated. The creature's nostrils flared, reading the chemical story of her fear, her fascination, her respect. Its ears twitched forward, analyzing the rhythm of her breathing, the tremor in her hands. For several heartbeats, predator and researcher regarded each other across 20 feet of moss-covered ground. Elena had devoted her life to studying creatures like this from a distance, through telephoto, lenses and remote monitoring equipment. But standing here, with nothing but forest silence between them, she understood that true knowledge came not from observation, but from connection. The apex took a single step forward, then another, its massive paws finding purchase on the soft earth with preternatural grace. Her training screamed at her to retreat, to make herself appear larger, to assert dominance. Instead, Elena slowly lowered herself to one knee, reducing her profile, showing deference rather than challenge. The gesture was instinctive, born not from field manuals, but from some deeper understanding of the moment's significance. The apex paused, tilting its massive head. Something shifted in its expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. For the first time in recorded history, a Cascadian apex had encountered a human who chose submission over aggression, curiosity over conquest. Elena felt the weight of that choice, understanding that this moment would ripple far beyond her own research. As twilight began to claim the forest, the apex retreated into the shadows, but Elena knew this was not an ending. It was a beginning, the first tentative note in a symphony of trust that would transform everything she thought she knew about the relationship between humanity and the wild. 3 weeks later, Elena returned to the forest with a different purpose. The apex, whom she'd begun calling Kaya after the Chinook word for elder sister, had left a trail of disturbed earth and broken branches leading deeper into the wilderness. Following the signs with growing concern, Elena discovered evidence of a struggle. Scattered fur, claw marks gouged deep into tree bark, and drops of blood darkening the forest floor. She found Kaya in a small clearing beside a rushing creek. Her massive form curled protectively around something Elena couldn't quite see. The predator's left hind leg was mangled, caught in what appeared to be the twisted remains of an illegal bear trap. The steel jaws had bitten deep into muscle and bone, and infection had set in during the days since the injury occurred. Kaya's ears flattened as Elena approached, a low growl rumbling from her chest. But there was no real threat in the sound, only pain and the desperate wariness of a mother protecting her young. Elena could now see what Kaya had been shielding. Two cubs, no more than a few months old, their eyes barely open, mewing softly as they searched for warmth against their mother's cooling body. The sight struck Elena like a physical blow. Kaya was dying, slowly and agonizingly, and her cubs would not survive without her. The illegal trap, probably set by poachers or ranchers operating without permits, had condemned not just one magnificent creature, but an entire family. Elena retreated to her vehicle and returned with her emergency veterinary kit. She'd trained for situations like this, though she'd never imagined applying those skills to a creature of Kaya's size and reputation. As she approached again, Kaya's golden eyes tracked her movement, but the predator made no move to attack. Instead, she seemed to recognize Elena from their previous encounter, some memory of that moment of mutual respect, creating a bridge across the chasm of their species. Working slowly and speaking in soft, constant tones, Elena began the delicate process of freeing Kaya from the trap. The predator's muscles tensed with each manipulation of the cruel device, but she held perfectly still, as if understanding that Elena was trying to help rather than harm. When the trap finally released its grip, Kaya let out a sound that was part growl, part whimper, a vocalization of such profound relief that Elena felt tears spring to her eyes. The cleaning and treatment of the wound took hours. Elena worked by the light of her headlamp as darkness claimed the forest, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. Kaya's breathing gradually became less labored, and her massive head lifted from the ground for the first time since Elena had found her. As Elena prepared to leave, intending to return the next day with additional supplies, something extraordinary happened. Kaya gently nudged one of her cubs toward Elena, the small form tumbling against the researcher's boots. The gesture was unmistakable, an offering of trust so profound that Elena felt the weight of it in her bones. She carefully lifted the cub, its tiny claws gripping her jacket as it sought warmth. Kaya watched without anxiety, her golden eyes holding something Elena had never seen in a wild predator: hope. The mother's instinct had somehow recognized that her species' greatest threat might also be its greatest ally. Elena spent that night in the forest, keeping vigil over the small family. As dawn broke through the canopy, she witnessed something that would change everything. Kaya's wound, while still serious, showed signs of healing that seemed almost miraculous. More importantly, the predator's trust had deepened into something approaching friendship. Word of Elena's encounter spread through the scientific community like wildfire, bringing Dr. Marcus Chen from the University of Washington and Dr. Sarah Whitehorse from the local Salish tribe's wildlife management program. They arrived to find Elena maintaining a camp near Kaya's territory, documenting behavior patterns that challenged everything previously understood about Cascadian apex social structure. Kaya was not, as researchers had believed, a solitary creature. She was the matriarch of a complex family group that included her injured cubs and 3 adult offspring from previous seasons. The pack had been watching Elena's interactions with their matriarch, weighing the implications of this unprecedented human presence in their territory. The other pack members emerged gradually over several days. First came Storm, Kaya's eldest son, whose silver coat bore the scars of territorial battles. His approach was cautious but not hostile. He seemed to understand that Elena posed no threat to his family's hierarchy. Next appeared Dawn and Twilight, twin daughters who moved with synchronized grace, their golden eyes holding the same intelligence Elena had seen in their mother. Dr. Chen, despite his extensive experience with large predators, found himself overwhelmed by the pack's coordinated assessment of the human researchers. "They're evaluating us," he whispered to Elena, as 3 sets of predatory eyes studied their movements. "This isn't random behavior. It's a deliberate decision-making process." Dr. Whitehorse nodded, her understanding enriched by generations of tribal knowledge. "My grandmother spoke of times when the boundaries between human and animal were more fluid," she said. "She said the ancestors knew that some creatures could choose to trust, just as humans could choose to be worthy of that trust." The pack's judgment came in the form of a test. One evening, as Elena worked to change Kaya's bandages, a group of territorial males from a competing pack approached the clearing. These were rogues, outcasts who'd been driven from their own territories and now sought to claim Kaya's weakened pack as their own. The confrontation was swift and brutal. Storm and his sisters positioned themselves between the intruders and their injured mother, but they were outnumbered. Elena found herself caught in the middle of a battle between apex predators, each creature weighing over 800 pounds of muscle and fury. What happened next defied every principle of wildlife management. Elena, instead of retreating to safety, stepped forward to stand beside Kaya. She had no weapons, no means to influence the battle's outcome, only her presence as a statement of allegiance. The gesture was both foolish and profound, a human choosing to risk everything for a predator that could easily destroy her. Kaya's response was immediate. Despite her injuries, she rose to her full height and released a sound that shook the entire forest, not the roar of a solitary predator, but the call of a matriarch claiming her authority. The competing pack hesitated, confused by the sight of a human standing beside their intended victim. That moment of hesitation was enough. Storm and his sisters pressed their advantage, and the territorial males retreated, recognizing that this pack had gained something unprecedented, a human ally who would stand with them in their darkest hour. As the forest settled back into quiet, Elena felt the weight of acceptance from the entire pack. They had tested her loyalty and found it genuine. More importantly, they had made a collective decision that would echo through generations. Humans, under the right circumstances, could be trusted. 6 months after the first encounter, Elena's research station had become something unprecedented. In the scientific world, a neutral ground where humans and apex predators coexisted by choice rather than chance. Kaya's pack had not only accepted the human presence, but had begun to actively seek interaction, treating Elena and her expanded team as honorary pack members. The transformation was remarkable. Dr. James Morrison, a behavioral ecologist from Stanford, documented communication patterns between the researchers and the pack that challenged fundamental assumptions about interspecies relationships. The predators had developed specific vocalizations for different team members, recognizing individual humans not just by sight and scent, but by behavioral patterns and emotional states. National Geographic photographer Maria Santos captured images that would appear on magazine covers worldwide. Elena working alongside Kaya to teach the cubs hunting techniques. Storm patrolling the research station's perimeter as if protecting territory. Dawn and Twilight flanking Dr. Chen as he collected samples from willing pack members. But the most significant development occurred when other predatory species began to take notice. A family of mountain lions established territory nearby, their behavior toward the research team notably less aggressive than documented norms. Black bears, traditionally competitors with the apex pack, began exhibiting curious rather than hostile responses to human presence in their territory. Dr. Whitehorse recognized the pattern from tribal histories. "It's like a cascade effect," she explained during a team meeting. When an apex species changes its relationship with humans, it sends ripples through the entire ecosystem. Other predators are watching, learning, adapting their own responses. The implications extended beyond scientific circles. Local communities, many of whom had lived in fear of the Cascadian apex for generations, began to reconsider their relationships with the wilderness. Ranchers reported decreased livestock predation, not because the predators had left the area, but because they seemed to be making deliberate choices to avoid human settlements. Elena found herself at the center of a phenomenon that transcended biology. Government officials, tribal leaders, and conservation groups sought her input on policies that had seemed impossible just months earlier. The idea of coexistence, true partnership between humans and apex predators, was no longer theoretical. The breakthrough came when Kaya's pack encountered a group of hikers who had become lost in a sudden blizzard. Instead of avoiding the humans or perceiving them as threats, the pack actively led them to safety, guiding the disoriented group to Elena's research station. The rescue was documented by one of the hikers' smartphones, creating viral footage that fundamentally shifted public perception of apex predators. Storm, who had initially been the most skeptical of human intentions, became an ambassador of sorts. He would often position himself where visiting researchers and officials could observe him, demonstrating behaviors that seemed designed to educate rather than intimidate. His scars, once symbols of territorial violence, became teaching tools that illustrated the complexity of predator social structures. The cubs, now approaching adolescence, showed no fear of humans whatsoever. They had grown up with Elena's presence as a normal part of their environment, and their fearlessness toward her species represented a generational shift that could reshape predator-human relationships for centuries to come. As winter approached, Elena realized that her work had evolved far beyond simple research. She had become a bridge between two worlds, translating the language of trust across species barriers that had seemed insurmountable. The moment Kaya had first chosen to trust her had created ripples that were now becoming waves, transforming not just scientific understanding, but the fundamental relationship between humanity and the wild. 2 years after that first encounter in the Cascadian forest, Elena stood before the United Nations Environmental Council, presenting findings that would reshape global conservation policy. Behind her, a massive screen displayed footage of what had become known as the Kaya Protocol, a revolutionary approach to wildlife management based on partnership rather than dominance. The presentation was interrupted by a video call from the research station. Dr. Chen's face appeared on screen, his expression mixing excitement with awe. "Elena, you need to see this," he said, panning his camera across the forest clearing. The gathered delegates watched in stunned silence as the footage revealed something unprecedented. Representatives from 7 different predator species moving together in apparent coordination. Kaya's pack formed the center of the group, but mountain lions, wolves, black bears, and even a pair of wolverines flanked them in what could only be described as an interspecies council. "They've been gathering like this for 3 days, Dr. Chen reported. "We think they're sharing information, communicating across species lines in ways we've never documented before." Dr. Whitehorse's voice joined the call. "My grandmother's stories spoke of such gatherings. She called them the agreements, times when the animal nations would come together to make decisions that affected entire ecosystems. We thought they were myths." Elena felt the weight of witnessing history. The trust that had begun with one wounded predator and one patient researcher had evolved into something that transcended individual relationships. The predators were organizing, adapting, choosing cooperation over competition, not just with humans, but with each other. The implications were staggering. Territorial disputes that had once resulted in deadly confrontations were being resolved through complex social negotiations. Hunting grounds were being shared rather than defended. Most remarkably, the predators seemed to be actively managing their own populations in response to environmental changes. A delegate from Brazil raised her hand. Dr. Vasquez, if we implement the Kaya protocol in the Amazon, what assurances do we have that apex predators won't simply view increased human presence as an invasion? Elena's response drew from 2 years of daily interaction with creatures that had once been considered humanity's enemies. The protocol isn't about managing predators, she explained. It's about earning their partnership. Kaya and her pack have taught us that apex predators are capable of long-term thinking, complex social planning, and genuine cooperation. They've chosen to work with us because we've proven ourselves worthy of that choice. The session continued for hours, with delegates from around the world sharing similar reports. In Siberia, researchers had documented collaborative hunting between humans and snow leopards. In Kenya, lions were actively protecting Maasai cattle from hyena attacks. In Alaska, polar bears were leading Inuit hunters to new seal populations, while avoiding areas where hunting might threaten bear cubs. As Elena concluded her presentation, she received a text message from the research station. The multi-species gathering had reached a decision. The predators were dispersing, each group carrying new behavioral patterns back to their territories. Within months, these changes would spread across continents as apex predators communicated through networks that humans were only beginning to understand. That evening, Elena returned to the forest clearing where everything had begun. Kaya was waiting, her cubs now full-grown and leading their own families. The matriarch's golden eyes held the same intelligence Elena remembered from their first encounter, but now there was something more. Satisfaction, perhaps, or the quiet pride of a teacher whose lessons had exceeded all expectations. Elena knelt beside her old friend, running her fingers through the silver-black fur that had once seemed so alien and threatening. Kaya's purr, a sound that could shake the ground, rumbled through the gathering darkness. "What have we started, old girl?" Elena whispered. Kaya's response was a gentle nudge that knocked Elena off balance, followed by what could only be described as predatory laughter. In that moment, Elena understood that the question was wrong. They hadn't started anything. They had simply remembered something that had always been possible. That trust, once earned, could transform not just individuals, but entire worlds. The moment humanity earned a predator's trust had become the moment both species remembered that. They had never truly been enemies, only strangers who had forgotten how to speak the same language of respect, patience, and love.